welcome to the third video in our series of videos. Now you might notice today I've got a dog on my lap. Now some of the time when you're listening to these videos you might hear a dog in the background. This is my dog, her name's Lily, and there's a very good reason that I've got my dog in the video with me today. The reason is because I've got a special name for the game that we're going to look at today. I'm going to put the dog down there. The game is called My Little Dog is a Nuisance, and we've got a very good reason for this name. Okay, why do I say my little dog is a nuisance? The reason is because she comes into the kitchen when I'm working and makes a nuisance of herself, tries to jump up on me and barks and just generally misbehaves. And so we put her out the door of the kitchen, and then she comes around into the other door and tries to get into the kitchen a different way. We put her out that door and she'll go back to the next door and try to get into the kitchen again. Right, what's this got to do with chess? Two of my students played a game recently and it reminded me of the dog. The reason for this is because when something doesn't work, try it a different way, just like my dog does. Okay, so the game we're going to look at today was a game played by two kids I coach in a primary school class. Now, just like the little dog, the kid playing with white tried a nice idea and it didn't work. And constantly through the game, he kept trying to find other ways to make it work. Okay, and that's the analogy with the dog. All right, before we go on, you might ask the question, why are we looking at a game played between two primary school kids? Why aren't we looking at a game played between two world champions? Very good reason for that. You're not going to find too many mistakes in a game played between two world champions, whereas a game between kids at primary school level, you are going to find some mistakes, and when we see mistakes, that's how we learn. Often looking at a game with mistakes is much better for your chess at the start than a game played which is at such a high level, it's hard to identify those mistakes. All right, so let's get started. So both of these kids, I coach them in primary school. They're both 8 or 9 years old, and so they're at the start of their chess journey. All right, so first kid, he begins with e4 in the center, okay, controlling space, and his opponent plays e5. Okay, so both players are playing in the center, controlling it with pawns, opening lines for pieces like the bishop, the queen, etc. Now, in the games we've looked at so far, white's played the knight out to f3. But in this game, a little bit different. The kid playing white brought his bishop out to c4. Okay, what's it doing there? It's in space in the center. Notice it's going after this square, f7. All right, black played his knight out to c6. Generally, you're probably better off using the king's knight. Anyway, knight c6, it's still a developing move. And white now, quite ambitiously, brought his queen out to h5. Now, some of you may have seen this before. What white's threatening is called scholar's mate. What he's doing here, he's threatening this next move with his queen to capture the pawn on f7, and that is checkmate, because the king's in check and it can't get out. It can't move to e7 because that'll be checked with the queen. Can't take the queen either because that would be checked with the bishop. You might remember from another video, we call this a battery. Bishop protects queen, queen protects bishop. Okay, so the kid playing with black, he recognised this. They're both fairly good players for their age. They recognise this. So he saw, oh yeah, my mate, he wants to checkmate me with his queen by taking on f7. So he did something about it. He blocked the queen out. He played his pawn to g6. All right, attacking the queen. Now, what happens when we kick the little dog out of the kitchen? She finds another way in. And the queen decided to find another way in. The queen moved back to f3, and from f3, the queen is once again threatening to go up to f7 with a checkmate. Okay, queen wants to go up to f7, and that will be checkmate. Exactly the same checkmate as we saw before. Okay, so black once again recognised this and's found a way out. Now there's a couple of ways out of this, and I'm going to go through them before I show you the move black played. The most obvious move black can play is moving the knight to f6. Knight f6, and that blocks, Lily, please shush. Knight f6 blocks the queen out from attacking on f7. Okay, so you notice the queen can't take on f7 now because the knight is blocking it. Now, this is a standard way to get out of this checkmate. But bear in mind, it will not work if white threatens the checkmate from h7. So if your queen's here and they bring the knight out this, or sorry, if your opponent's queen's here and you bring the knight out here to f6, this is not going to avoid checkmate. The queen will simply take on f7 and you've lost the game. You've got checkmated there. So don't just play the knight blindly. Make sure that you recognise what exactly white is threatening, where exactly white is threatening the checkmate. Okay, so in this case, if it's on f3, well, that's blocking the checkmate out. But if it was on h5, that knight would not get out of the check. That would not get you out of the checkmate. So the other move black could play is queen f6. And see, that also stops the queen from capturing on f7. And if the queen takes the queen, you recapture with the knight. Now, someone asked me, I was showing this to someone, they said, but I don't want to lose my queen. It's okay to trade queens. You can give your queen up if you win your opponent's queen. That's just a trade or a swap. You're not losing it. It's okay to give queen for queen, or rook for rook, or bishop for knight, or knight for bishop, pawn for pawn. That's okay. It's not okay to give your queen up for a pawn, or to give your rook up for a pawn, or something like that, because then you're losing with the material. It's okay to trade. If it's a fair trade, that's fine. Queen for queen is fine. Okay, this was not the move played in the game though. The move that black played, he still recognised there was a checkmate threat, but he didn't quite find the best move to get out of it. He did get out of it though. He played f6. Now, alright, to his credit, he got out of the checkmate. But he didn't really help himself very much here. This move, as we said in the first video, is usually not a good move because it blocks the knight. And it does weaken the king a little bit, not so much here, but definitely blocks the knight and it blocks the queen as well. So probably not the best way to try to get out of this. Alright, so what did white do? White developed a piece. Now normally we'd develop knights on this square. You can't do that here because the queen's there. So what white did, white developed the knight here at e2. Alright, sometimes you have to improvise. If you can't play a certain move because it's not possible, you've got to try to find the next best move. And he felt that putting the knight here was better than leaving the knight at home doing nothing. And he's right. I mean, even if you can't go to the best square, at least get the knight out into a square where it's doing something. Okay, so black now followed suit and made a mistake. And they both actually made a mistake over the next move. Black decided to pretty much copy and put his knight into e7, developing it. Now, he's tried to get the knight out, which is a good thing. The only problem is when he's moved that knight out, he's left something hanging. This pawn at f6 is now undefended, and white could simply take that with a queen. And if white does this, this is now a disaster for black, because white is attacking the rook. See, the queen's attacking the rook, and white is also threatening queen up here to f7 checkmate. So that's actually a fork. you're threatening the rook, and you're threatening to just play the checkmate. So not a totally conventional fork, but it is a fork. Okay, so White and White missed this. So a little bit disappointing that he didn't notice this. And I think this is what happens when you play too fast. I think they both played a bit too fast, that move. So he left the pawn on f6 hanging, and White, for whatever reason, just missed the fact that he could take that pawn for nothing. Okay, so this is why we look at games like this, because there's opportunities in a game, and you've got to be able to see those opportunities when they present themselves. So, all right, back to what did White do? Well, what does the little dog do when you kick it out of the kitchen? Tries to come in another way. And when you put her out again, she tries to come in from the first way. When you put her out again, you give her some chicken, she eats it, but she'll still try to get back in the kitchen. Same sort of thing here. The queen tried to threaten yet another checkmate. This time, White moved his queen across to b3. Okay, and once again, White is threatening a checkmate. Slightly different one though. What he's threatening to do here is to play bishop to f7. And that would be checkmate because you've got the queen and bishop battery. That's a check. The king obviously can't move to any vacant squares because there are none. It can't take the bishop because that'll be check from the queen. So that would be a checkmate as well. Now, anyone who watched the last video, Paul Morphy's Opera House game, would recognise this queen move. It happened in the last video too, threatening the exact same checkmate. Okay, I don't know whether the kid playing White had seen this move before, that game before. I suspect he had. Anyway, good work. Brings a queen across to b3, threatening the checkmate in a different way. Just like the little dog gets booted out of the kitchen, she finds her own way in. Sometimes if you shut the sliding door, she finds a way to get around the sliding door. Sometimes when you're faced with a problem in chess and your opponent finds an answer to it, find a different way to do it. Try to find a different way in. Okay, so here, Black recognised it yet again. White's threatened this same checkmate 3 times in 3 different ways. And now, Black's faced with it again, and twice, Black's found the answer to it. Alright, so Black saw the checkmate. He saw bishop f7 check, and he recognised that that was checkmate. Alright, what does he do about it? It's checkmate because Black has nowhere to run. So what he decided to do was give himself somewhere to run to. He moved his pawn up to d6. Now, in the end, this is actually a bad move. He's got a far better move. He should have moved that pawn to d5. Although that will probably lose a pawn. White can take that, but it'll stop the checkmate. Right, what's wrong with d6? Pawn to d6. I mean, it gives the king the d7 square. So his idea was when White plays the check, he's going to run out to the d7 square. All right, so let's see, does this work? All right, so White decides, all right, well, I'll bring my bishop up to f7, playing the check. Okay, bishop check on f7, king's in check, and it can't take the bishop because of our queen, the battery. King decides to move out to d7. Okay, and Black thought that, yep, he's got out of the mess. But White had thought one move ahead, or one move further ahead. He now found a way. And once again, the little dog gets back into the kitchen. Queen e6 checkmate. Wow, have a look at that. Same tactic and that same battery between the queen and the bishop. One thing I want you to notice when you're looking at this game is that this battery is very powerful both ways. It doesn't matter whether it's the queen giving the checkmate with help from the bishop, or if it's the bishop giving the checkmate with help from the queen. A checkmate's a checkmate. Any is a good way to find a checkmate. And this, once again, is checkmate because the king is in check, okay, the queen's giving check, and it can't get out. It can't move up to e8 because of the bishop. It also can't capture the queen because of the bishop. So this was checkmate. So this was the My Little Dog is a Nuisance game. So very nice game. Probably not the most perfect game, but quite a pretty game, quite a nice game. And I really love the fact that two kids aged 8 or 9 managed to find these complicated concepts. Now I've got a little bit of extra time left in this video, so I'm going to show you one more very short game. And I really want to emphasize the point about that f7 square. Okay, so this game is the shortest game of chess you'll ever see in your life. Okay, in fact, it's not actually possible for a game to be any shorter than this. Okay, so we know, we've talked quite a lot about the f7 square for black, this square here, being very, very vulnerable. The reason is because only the king protects that square. See, this square is protected by a rook. This is protected by a bishop. That's protected by a bishop. That's protected by a queen. Protected by a queen. Protected by a bishop. Protected by a rook. This square is only protected by a king. Okay, and it's just, basically it's the same for white. The equivalent for white is this square here, f2. This square is just as vulnerable for white as this one is for black. And I'm going to show you a very, very short game. And this was another game played in one of my primary school classes. And to be fair, the kid playing white is a beginner, so he's going to be better. He's already a much better player than he was when he played this game. Okay, so he started out with f3. Now, this is probably the worst first move on the board. Okay, because it doesn't control the center, it doesn't develop a knight. In fact, it blocks the knight, blocks this knight from coming to its natural square. But more important than that, it opens up this line, this diagonal. If you have a look at this, this is now very, very vulnerable, this diagonal. Okay, so black, who was a much stronger player, she was a more experienced player, she did the right thing. She controlled the center with pawns. She moved her pawn to e5. Really good move. Just like e4 for white's a really good move, e5 for black a really, really good move. Firstly, because it controls the center, but secondly, opening a line for a bishop, but also opening a line for the queen. Now, how bad is this for white? It's not completely terrible, but white's already a little bit worse. White's going to have trouble getting the knight out. Here, if white had played a move such as e4, for instance, white's probably still okay. But the move white played now made matters worse because white weakened this diagonal. He moved his pawn up to g4. Now, if we think about what we should be doing in the opening, there's three things we need to do at the start. We call them the golden rules. Number one, control the center with pawns. Well, she's done that. White hasn't. Number two, develop your pieces, knights and bishops. Well, this move has not developed a knight. And rule three is to castle and get your king safe. Well, you can't castle when these two pieces are still there. The problem with this move, though, is it weakens this diagonally far too much. And now the girl playing as black, she got herself a very easy win by exploiting this weak diagonal. So remember, look at this diagonal. very, very weak with a king at the end of it. What she did here, she didn't need to bring out a knight or a bishop, because as I said before, anyway is a good way to give a checkmate. She just brought her queen out and gave checkmate, because the king is in check and it can't get out of check. It can't move here because that's still check. So she won the quickest game you could actually possibly win. 2 moves. All right, how could white have avoided it? And so nice win, she did well. How could white have avoided it? Basically any move other than g4. So for example, even if white played a bad move like this, white's still not getting checkmated, because if the queen does give this check, white can get out of it by blocking with g3. But the fact that the kid had played g4, the fact that he played g4 meant that after she played queen h4 check, he didn't have that resource. He didn't have this g3 move up his sleeve, and hence that is checkmate. So a nice win in the end for black. And white, the main thing he's learnt is to be really careful of this diagonal. Be careful of f2 with white, f7 with black. And for black, here, exploit this. If they give you that square and that diagonal, make sure you use it. Okay, and for the start of the lesson, remember, just like my little dog, if you can't find a way to make something work, look for a different way to do it. Sometimes it'll work. In the first game, the little boy, he threatened checkmate 3 times. His opponent defended it twice, but the 3rd time, he got him. Just like my little dog keeps getting back into the kitchen. There's nothing I can do to stop it. All right, see you next lesson.